Hey, I'm Shane from Shane's Law. I'm here today with Thomas. He's one of the brain injury lawyers we've got on the team here at Shane's Law in our concussion and brain injury group. And today we're going to talk a little bit about traumatic brain injuries and sort of the initial components of these kind of cases. So Thomas, you want to get us started?
Yeah, I think one of the things that you get started with when you're thinking about a brain injury is that you have not only the primary injury where you're taking a direct hit to your head and the implications that come after that, but you're also talking about the secondary injury and the things that develop.
And what's a secondary injury?
Secondary injury is everything that happens as a result of that initial disruption to the brain. There's a lot of ways of thinking about it, a lot of ways of illustrating it. I think one of the examples that I've seen to use it to illustrate it really well is, thinking about your brain as a city. Some people talk computer, but the science has kind of told us along the way, we're not just a computer with input, output. There's a lot more complexities that are going on inside the brain.
The primary injury is the impact, right? That's when the brain takes the initial damage and hit on your skull or on whatever it hits. That's that. And secondary is what happens later.
Yeah, the primary injury, boom, head hits the steering wheel, head hits the headrest, or not even having to strike your head. You've got a massive acceleration, deceleration force that smashes your brain up against the hardest object inside your car, which is usually the inside of your skull.
Okay. So
you've got a massive smash, warping of the brain, pushing up against there. And the primary injury would be, well, I'm having a headache, or I've got a laceration on my head, or I've got, a large bump, or migraines, or something to that effect. Secondary injury was what happens as a result of that disruption to the internal functions of your brain, because there's a lot more going on inside your brain than just a big bowl of jelly sitting in there.
All right, now let's go back a little bit. You said that the head doesn't actually have to hit anything. And I guess the G-force or the force can cause your brain to sort of shift one way or the other, and that can do some of this damage by itself?
Absolutely, yes. I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that you have to hit your head to have suffered a brain injury. And the reality is that, again, the hardest object inside your car is usually the inside of your skull. So if you think about the whiplash motion, if you're driving along, somebody hits you from behind, your head slams back, and then it gets whipped forward, and there's kind of that rocking motion. Your brain is attached to the inside of your skull. There's a lot of connections inside of your brain. Things can get sheared, things get damaged. You can have bruising, you can have swelling, you can have loss of function in a lot of different ways.
So, all right, I mean, that's kind of scary, actually. I mean, you hear that because everybody thinks brain injury, hit your head on the windshield, something else, but looks like the shearing can cause some damage in and of itself. And shearing is just your brain sort of spinning a little bit or inside or even bumping into the front of the skull and for the back of the skull.
Yeah, I think it's just some of the connective tissues almost being dislodged or ripping off a little bit, in terms of things just kind of getting twisted, things getting torn. Shearing is almost like a cut or tear of some of that tissue in a way. It is scary because when somebody goes to the doctor, I think the CDC has said perhaps something like 80 to 90% of brain injuries are missed when you go to the when you go to the hospital.
When you go to the emergency room because they're just trying to make sure you're not going to die.
Right. Yeah, they're checking, hey, is your brain bleeding? Do you have, has your skull been, dented in, and do you have a skull fracture that's going to cause you something emergently? Or, you might have someone go to an urgent care, and I've even had people go to the urgent care and they say, I can't do anything in terms of telling you about your head injury. You're going to have to go to the ER.
Really? Yeah. So they just hands off.
Just hands off. They either aren't up to date on what the science says about it, or they're just hesitant to say something that I don't know, for whatever reason, you would think a doctor would be able to know about. You think that would be a basic area of knowledge for everybody who goes through medical school.
So urgent care says we can't touch it. We know if they go to the ER, the CDC says they're missed there. I guess that's one of the reasons why when people are showing symptoms, you talk to them about, hey, we need to go find basically a brain doctor. Is that right?
Yeah. What we want to do is we want to ask them the questions that a doctor in the ER who's attending to a massive trauma, somebody's, body broken in half by a tractor trailer, that the questions that they might not have had time to ask or just been too busy to ask or didn't think to ask. So we want to ask those questions and get that information that they might not have known to share. It's not just, are you in pain? Is there something different after this accident in terms of what makes you who you are or how you typically function?
What are like the top 3 questions you would ask somebody?
One of the ones I think that helps me identify and say, well, maybe this person needs to go to a neurologist is asking about ringing in their ears or blurry or double vision.
Okay.
Because that ringing in your ears, that's one of the big symptoms that would say, hey, you've suffered a brain injury here.
Now, does that ring in the ears all the time? So it's like 24/7, or is it come and go?
From what I understand, it's just, do you have ringing in your ears that wasn't there before and is there after the accident? So it wouldn't necessarily be there all the time, but it may be triggered by, I have an onset of a migraine, and then, okay, I'm starting to get this humming in my ears that's getting louder, and I'm not really able to
Because you don't suffer from, yeah.
Yeah. So it's just one of those things that can be intermittent or it could be pretty constant. I think if it was pretty constant, it would, probably say this is something that's more severe.
And you mentioned migraines. I know that's one of the biggest issues we get concerned about is if you're having migraines, what's causing those, right? Because something causes a migraine. You don't just get one.
Right. And thankfully, it doesn't seem like most people typically have migraines. It's not something that is just a regular everyday occurrence. I mean, a lot of people do, but a lot of times when you ask people, it's like, hey, are you having headaches? Does your head hurt? Yeah. Well, is it just a headache or is it something that goes beyond that? Would you talk about it as a migraine? Is it when the headache happens, do you have any other symptoms that come up? And one of the things we'll hear is when the headaches come, I get dizzy.
Okay.
Or when the headaches come, I can't be in a room with any light. I have to, cover my eyes, light sensitivity. No, they're big indicators.
Dizziness, light sensitivity, ringing in the ears, or migraines. I mean, those are sort of the big triggers for us, at least in the early stages of a case, right?
Yeah, and I always like when we're talking to a client to have someone who's a loved one in the room with them, who's kind of listening into the phone call if they're okay with it, and say, hey, would you say that you've gotten more irritable or had mood swings or personality change? You'll sometimes hear somebody in the background, oh yeah, you are. They don't know. They don't recognize it. They don't see it. But like, oh yeah, baby, you've been pretty cranky lately. Way more than usual.
Way more than normal.
Yeah, honey, I've never seen you like this. So you get a lot of comments from the gallery that are kind of funny at the same time, kind of sad.
And they trigger us to maybe dig a little deeper.
Yeah, you start asking those questions about people who are close to the person who is injured. Say, hey, what are you noticing that's different since this happened? And again, it might not be something that somebody even picks up on themselves. Like, well, he's more withdrawn. Instead of playing with the kids when he gets home from work at 5:30, he shuts himself in this dark room and plays video games and listens to, house music or
just some change, something that's changed.
Something very different usually happens. And a lot of times they say, man, I knew something was different, but nobody ever really, thought to ask, or I never thought it was related to the accident. And it's like, well, did it happen? Was it happening before this? No. Has it been happening since this? And has it been getting worse? Well, yeah. It's like, maybe you should talk to the doctor about that.
Yeah. So talk to the doctor, find a little more info.
Yeah, just share that information, because if you're not sharing the information with the doctor and letting them know everything that's wrong with you, they can't use that information to help you. You're keeping something from them that doesn't allow them to diagnose you and get to the bottom of what's going on. So we're saying, hey, tell them anything and everything that's bothering you and let them figure it out, because we're not doctors and we don't even play them on TV.
So it sounds like part of your job when you're talking to clients is, hey, tell us what's going on, basically. Just talking to the clients, getting them to give us some info, and then we ask some particular questions. And if something comes up, then we're like, make sure you tell your doctor that, because people don't even know enough about it to tell their doctor.
Absolutely. And it's one of the things, just being a good listener and not just trying to get information to use it for your purpose, but hearing someone's story and hearing what they're going through and kind of making them a whole person. Because a lot of times you meet with somebody or you talk to somebody on the phone and they just become, another number, another, case or another, something like that. But these are people and they have stories, and those stories are what make them who they are. And their story is so much more complex than we can ever really gather. So one of the big things I think that we do and we do well is really getting to know our clients, know what makes them tick, know what, makes them smile. What do they do when they're not at work? What do they do at home with their kids? Like, what are their relationships like? What is that every day like?
And, you talk about, the irritability, right? Kind of thing, which sounds, everybody gets irritable. Certainly with their spouse, somebody gets irritable. I think when we talked to John, one of the other lawyers in the group, he said, the statistics for divorce and stuff after head injuries is significantly higher because of things like that. People get more irritable, then suddenly they're having more friction with their spouse. Things go south, especially if nobody knows the reason why.
Right.
And I think that's one of the great things about just finding it out is it makes it real, and people are like, oh, okay. Kind of like, oh, that's the brain injury talking, not you.
It's not, the symptoms of a brain injury aren't just going to be your pain. It's going to be the emotional aspects of it. What happens to you psychologically? Do you become more depressed as a result of a brain injury, as a result of some of the chemical functions or hormonal issues, or hormonal functions that the brain's responsible for? Do those trigger a cascade of effects? That's another one of the questions we ask is, do you have any anxiety or any depression? If you had some before, okay, but has anything become heightened as a result of this? And we get a lot of people saying, "Why? I hadn't. Yeah, I'm incredibly anxious since this happened, where I feel like I'm in a fog and I can't function, and I'm more lethargic, and I don't want to play with my kids. I don't want to emotionally involve with my wife anymore or my husband. I'm withdrawn." So the brain is just so incredibly complex. Like we said before, computer versus a city. I think a city is a really good illustration to kind of show what's the difference between those primary and then what's that secondary.
And I think one of the key things is once we identify somebody who's had that brain injury, we can at least talk to them about it. The family can even experience some sort of treatment, but also they know it's real and they know what caused it. So then we can begin to get them treatment for it versus just go out and live your life and nobody knows what the heck is going on, right?
Definitely. And that's one of the biggest comforts to our client is when somebody actually hears them, and it's not just, I'm living in this way that my life has never been led before. All these changes are going on. No doctors are talking to me about it. But then all of a sudden you speak with somebody who hears you and then connects you with a neurologist or a brain injury specialist who can say, hey, look, this is real. And we can see it in this imaging. We can see in this particular area of your brain for the first time, and in the last couple of years, technology's come out, for the first time, we can actually see physical damage to your brain. This part, water, fluids don't go through it anymore.
This may be why you're a little more irritable, huh?
Yeah, this lines up here.
This lines up exactly with
regulation. Yeah.
Or this is why you're having the dizziness issues or the ringing in your ears, and it's not just imaginary, it's real going on, and here's why. And I think that's one of the things when you were talking to me about, the testing software, that the MRI, that, you can see that. And then the doctor who doesn't even know all the symptoms can say, I bet you're having issues like this. And then the client's like, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Or they've even told us in the, previously, yeah, I'm having a bunch of these issues. Then we get it back and they're like, oh, this client's probably struggling with these issues. And we're like, bam, 100, it matches up. I don't want to say 100%, but really close.
Yeah. Correlates really strongly. And this is new technology that 20 years ago nobody would have ever known. They would have just said, oh, your head hurts? Yeah, sure, my head hurts too. Anybody can say that your head hurts. Anybody can say that your mood's changed, you're more depressed. Everybody's depressed. But now we can say, no, there's actually been brain damage to this particular area of this person, and as a result there's been a cascade.
We're going to struggle with these other issues. And what's cascade mean? When you talk about a cascade effect, what does that mean?
Yeah, so when I say cascade, it's, like we talked about with that primary injury, you have the initial impact, acceleration, deceleration, or direct blow. It's what happens as a result of that initial blow. And that can be something that manifests itself over the course of months. Okay. So, using the example of a city, if you thought about the brain as a city, it's bustling metropolis, Charlotte, things are going on, people are going to work, all kinds of things to keep the lights on and keep, the train running on time. You've got, basically, let's think about the primary injury as an earthquake. Earthquake comes into Charlotte, not typical for Charlotte, but, earthquake, maybe New Madrid Fault in Tennessee causes an earthquake in Charlotte. That's your direct impact. That's your primary injury. As a result of that, you're going to see a lot of things change in the city. You're going to see power lines down. You might see traffic disruptions due to cracks in the road. You might see structural issues in the buildings due to the intense shaking that's going on. So these are kind of delayed effects. They're not caused by the actual earthquake being there, but this is stuff that ripples, cascades down the line as a result of that. So that would be what we talk about with a cascade. And there are certain functions within the brain that happen that are disrupted by that initial impact when we talk about biochemical and cellular responses to that primary injury.
So, I want to go back, when you said we've run into experiences where the ER doesn't diagnose somebody or the urgent care doesn't diagnose somebody. I guess it shows me that this is such a specialized area of medicine that your regular docs really probably not equipped well to deal with that. I mean, would you say that? I mean, have you seen any primary care doctors order the imaging studies that show the injured parts of the brain, or just the regular generic MRIs?
Rarely even seen an MRI. And I think part of the reason would be is that, the brain, like the ocean, is largely unexplored, and we're learning more about it every day. Just like they say, we know 5% of the ocean.
Yeah.
I think it's probably similar to what we know about the brain, and the science is changing by the day. Massive studies being released all the time about changing clinical definitions of it, how a concussion or MTBI, mild traumatic brain injury, may not just be, an event. It's a process.
Really?
It plays out a disease that plays out over a period of time.
So just the concussion itself is just the first part, and then you're going to have ripple effects that just continue on, sometimes longer and longer and longer.
Absolutely. Yeah, and just seeing how those play out and what those do to a person. And that's why it's important to have those specialized doctors who are on top of these things. And it's not just somebody who's, an orthopedic surgeon or a primary care physician who's, trained to look at a very specialized area. The brain is a very specialized area on its own, and it would probably be unreasonable, and you wouldn't want a doctor who knew everything about every area, because jack of all trades, master of none.
I was trying to think, has my primary care doc ever asked my spouse, like, hey, is he more irritable and stuff? And the answer is no, but it sounds like in the brain injuries, one of the primary diagnostic tools is talking to the friends and family around that person and say, yeah, what's different? What are the changes?
Yeah, because you can have all the diagnostics in the world. You can have someone say this is a concussion. Well, what does a concussion mean when you're talking to an adjuster, to a jury? A lot of times it's, he has a concussion. Well, what's that mean? Let's talk to his friends and family and see what happened. Had a gentleman who lived on the beach, used to go to all, different, shag clubs, style of dancing and all that, shag clubs, be on the beach, doing all the activities with his, almost retired community. Got his head almost put through a windshield when the seatbelt didn't catch on him. Left a, indentation on the windshield the size of his head. And after that moment, his relationship with his fiance completely fell apart. He became a hermit, stopped cutting his grass. And that was a story that I was able to use with, an adjuster and explain it to her. Hey, look, we're not just saying this is a concussion. This has had massive cascading effects on this guy's life. So, there's a lot there in terms of what happens after that initial boom.
Wow. The lesson we would leave our listeners with is, if you have a concussion, it's not just a concussion. You got to look for all the secondary effects that may be impacting you or those around you from the concussion, or even you, and make sure you're getting treatment for those, and that you're not just dealing with it or toughing it out kind of deal.
Yeah. You just want to get back to feeling the way that you did before the accident. That's what the laws are here to protect you for. That's what we're trying to do when we help people. It's like, let me get you back to the way that you were before this, if not as close to it as we possibly can. And that's why people have insurance, to protect and take care of people. Sometimes, a lot of times, maybe most of the time, insurance doesn't really do that. So that's why you get lawyers to fight for you.
All right. Well, Thomas, thanks for being with us today. And Thomas, once again, is one of the lawyers in the concussion and brain injury group at Chainsaw Law. And for our listeners out there, like and subscribe for future episodes, and hit the bell for notifications. Thanks.
In pain, so I call Shane. 980-999-9999. In pain, call Shane.